Good afternoon, Prehealth advisors. My name is Tony Mancuso, and I lead communication efforts for SHPEP. I bring you greetings on behalf of the National Program Office, and with that, I'm excited to welcome you to our SHPEP Prehealth Advisor Workshop. We are so pleased to have you with us and grateful to come together to create community in this virtual space. As most of you know, building community and growing your network are core elements of the SHPEP experience. This event is designed to give you the opportunity to connect virtually with experienced and passionate pre-health advisors. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items. First, be sure to use the Q&A feature to ask questions during our session. The chat function should only be used to communicate with other advisors across the nation, provide advice, or comment if something resonates with you. I now have the honor and privilege of introducing Harold Baker. Not only is he a friend, colleague, and mentor, he serves as the Deputy Director of SHPEP. Harold, feel free to take it away.
Thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate that warm introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. SHPEP is so excited to offer this pre-health advisor workshop, and we are really excited to know that pre-health advisors play such a critical role in the application process for SHPEP. So we have a few slides to discuss your very powerful role in SHPEP and how you guide applicants through the process. So this slide shows you that you have a serious impact, and I can guarantee you that if those were my fingers, I'd be pushing it to positive, because your positive impact on the application process for pre-health for SHPEP applicants is phenomenal. So let's take a look at the numbers. Well, before we look at the numbers, let's talk about it. When you think of what you do, not only are you doing the gentle nudges, but you're also doing something else. You're doing the not so gentle nudges. You're making sure that students get their applications completed and complete the process to enroll in SHPEP, and we greatly appreciate it. So what you do definitely does make a difference, and it helps bring more applicants to SHPEP, and we can demonstrate that as we take a look at the numbers. So before we do that, let's talk about some key terms that I'll be referring to when I go through the numbers. The first is a registrant. A registrant is someone who opens an SHPEP application. The next key term is a submitter. So a submitter is someone who opens their application, completes it, and hits submit before the deadline. And then, of course, a completer is a student who has hit submit before the deadline, and they turned in all of their application documents, which include all college transcripts and their letter of recommendation. So those are the key terms, and now let's take a look at the numbers. So the impact pre-health advisors have by the numbers when you're looking at converting registrants to submitters. So you do an amazing job of converting registrants to submitters. And so people who open the application, and the way that we track this information, before I get ahead of myself, the way we track this information is by, on the application, we ask students what their referral source was. So in this chart, you'll see pre-health advisor referrals. So applicants who listed a pre-health advisor as their referral source versus the applicants who listed the website as their referral source. And before we go any further, I want you to know that you may think those numbers are kind of close, but they're not even that close, because actually we are certain that a lot of students who list the website as their referral source were actually pushed to the website by their pre-health advisor. So again, you play an incredible role in making sure that applicants open their SHPEP application and hit submit before the deadline. So now let's take a look at some other work that you do in converting students along the process. So you definitely do an amazing job of converting submitters to completers. So submitters are, as I said, people who hit submit before the deadline, but the completers are individuals who turn in all those documents. And so as you see, you definitely beat the websites. And as I said, website referrals are usually many folks who have been pushed there by their pre-health advisor. So again, a large percentage of people who list a pre-health advisor as their referral source, they actually go from submitters to completers. But the next slide will be the most important. And that slide is converting completers to matriculants. And you'll see that's a little harder lift because we do have a limited number of slots. The Summer Health Professions Education Program usually has about 7,500 to 8,000 applicants. So that would be all registrants. And we select about 960 students to participate. So those are all the matriculants. But you'll note that, again, you still have an edge on the people who listed the website as their referral source. So the numbers don't lie. You definitely do an amazing job of helping students go from registrant to matriculant through that SHPEP application process. And as you're going to discover throughout this presentation and all the things that we'll do during this session, you are an amazing cog in the machine that we hope will produce more wonderful doctors, dentists, and other healthcare professionals. So with that, I'm going to introduce our moderator and a wonderful colleague at the AAMC, Kimberly Bellamy, and she's going to take it away from here. Take it away, Kim.
Thank you, Harold. As mentioned, my name is Kimberly Bellamy, and I serve as Senior Specialist Strategic Programs and Partnerships within the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Cluster of the Association of American Medical Colleges. Within my role, I have the privilege and honor of working with a number of partners and stakeholders on programmatic efforts to increase diversity within medicine and the health professions. So I'm coming to you today to share one of our newest initiatives that will actually help enable you to create an even bigger impact on diversifying medicine and the health professions. And that's our Action Collaborative for Black Men in Medicine. This initiative was established in August 2020 between the AAMC and the National Medical Association, which is the largest and oldest professional association for Black and African American physicians. The two entities came together after recognizing that only minimal changes had occurred in terms of the number of Black men we were seeing applying and matriculating into medicine. The group first came together in 2015 with the release of AAMC's report, Altering the Course, which highlighted the fact that more Black men were applying and matriculating to medicine in 1978 than in 2014 when the report was released. So as a result, as I mentioned, only minimal changes have been seen since the report release. So the two groups came together and say, how can we put together a program or initiative that is going to and lead to systemic changes. So that is how the Action Collaborative for Black Men in Medicine was born. The group is comprised of a number of subject matter experts across various different industries, including academic medicine, higher education, social sciences, K-12, as well as a few students who are currently completing their medical education or applying to the process. And this group is called the Steering Corps. Again, they have been meeting since August 2020 to work on these three key goals. One, identifying replicable solutions to amplify and support Black men's interests in careers in medicine as well as biomedical sciences. Two, using existing data and evidence to develop systems-based solutions to address exclusionary practices that create barriers for Black men and prevent them from having equitable opportunities to successfully enroll in medical school. And finally, convening key stakeholders to act on solutions that are measurable over the next 2 to 5 years. So as a result of the group working on these three different goals, they have narrowed down their primary focus to two key areas, one being focusing on how can they influence leadership within academic medicine? And then the other area they decided to focus on was pre-health advising. During our discussions over the last year, we identified there was a number of pre-med factors that were contributing to the lack of Black men that we're seeing in a profession, but we decided to start with pre-health advising, more specifically coming up with a pre-medical advising training because of the following reasons. As a result of different discussions with our stakeholders, our subject matter experts, as well as research, we determined that there's no formal or standardized training to enter the profession. Two, there's a wide variation in the type of advising students may receive, and that's very dependent on the roles that you all may serve at your institutions. I know some of you may be in more formal advising roles, and that others may be more in a generalist role or may serve as a faculty advisor. So recognizing that, we wanted to put something in place so that regardless of your role, that you're receiving the same level of information about medical pathways. Number three, pre-health advisors can act as gatekeepers, but I will dare to say as a gateway to the profession instead of gatekeepers. So we want to make sure that you all have the right information in order to best prepare your students to enter this career. And then lastly, we felt that by putting together these educational modules is going to better equip you so we can see changes sooner than later. So we have a working group that is in the discovery phase on determining what are the details that we want to put in this pre-medical training. And we want to hear from you so that we are meeting your needs and providing you with information that will best help you within your roles. And there's two primary ways in which you can do that. The first being, we're going to be holding some listening sessions at the top of 2022, and we would love to hear from the pre-health advising community. So if you're interested in participating in one of those listening sessions, please email us at actioncollab for Black Men in Medicine at AAMC.org. And then the other way in which you can get involved, if you say, I don't know if I have time for a listening session, but I still want to stay in the loop about what's going on, then we also have this virtual community, and that's for anyone that has an interest in this topic. And this is a great way for you to network with other pre-health advisors, as well as those who are at our medical schools who run different programs to support Black men. You get the opportunity to share effective practices and promote your resources and programs. And I'll just pause to say as well, the information that I presented on the Action Collaborative for Black Men in Medicine, while we do have a specific focus on Black men, we're also hoping that any of these solutions that we put in place will also benefit and be applicable to all of our students who are underrepresented in medicine. So again, if you're interested in learning more, if you want to participate, provide feedback, please email us at Action Collab for Black Men or Action Collab for Black Men at AAMC.org. So now that I've shared a little bit more about myself, as well as one of the key initiatives that we're working on that has a connection to pre-health advising, now we want to learn a little bit more about who's in the audience. You should see a poll that has popped up so we can get a good sense of who is joining us today. You will have the opportunity to answer 6 questions, which includes information about how long have you worked in your pre-health advising profession. 2, how many pre-health advisors are at your institution? And just referencing what I mentioned earlier, I know that every institution is different. You might have a whole center for pre-health advising, or it may just be you. But we want to know what exactly does that look like at your school? How many undergraduate students are enrolled at your institution? 4, which health professions do you advise? I know some cover the whole gamut of health professions, and then others only focus on medicine or another health profession. So this is something else that just help equip us better as we're going through our discussions today. Number 5, can you identify your pre-health students at your institution? Is there something in place in which you are able to quickly determine who those students are in their first, second year at your institution? And then finally, how many pre-health students do you advise? And I know, again, that could be very wide ranging there, but we're going to take a few minutes to allow everyone to answer. And then I will report back with some of those results. Okay, we're going to give it another few seconds here, and then we will close out the poll. All right. So thank you all for participating in our poll. So everyone has a good sense of who is joining us today for our first question in terms of how long have you been within your role as a pre-health advisor? It looks like a majority of you are pretty new to the profession and answered 0 to 5 years. A close runner up is 5 to 10 years. For our second question, how many pre-health advisors are at your institution? It looks like a majority you are the sole person at your institution who is providing pre-health advising. And then a range of different answers fall under that. So some of you have more of a team to help support your efforts there. But we have noted that most of you are taking on a brunt of that responsibility. For number 3, how many undergraduate students are enrolled at your institution? The answers were pretty close here, with 31% having 5,000 or under undergraduate students, 26% 5,000 to 15,000, and 43% was the largest number here with 15,000 or more. Which health professions do you advise? We have a majority of people who definitely are advising for medicine here, followed by a range of all the other different health professions. It was fairly equal split here. Number 5, can you identify students at your institution? And it looks like about half of you can't identify who those students are, and the other half have to be a little bit more creative with making sure that you're getting those resources to students who are interested in pursuing the health professions. And then finally, how many pre-health students do you advise? And it looks like a majority of you are advising 40 or more students in any given semester. So thank you all so much for participating in that poll. And now I am going to turn it over to our first presenter, Mr. Francisco Castellan, who serves as Assistant Director for Pre-Health Advising at Georgia Institute of Technology. And he's going to take us through our first discussion on how to facilitate exploring the health professions conversation with SHPEP.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you everyone for inviting me today. It's an honor to be able to collaborate with an amazing group of folks from SHPEP and also my colleague Josie at the University of Arizona. My story today really is focusing on the third bullet point, that the initiative that Kimberly mentioned is about how are advisors often viewed as gatekeepers. And my focus today is how do you engage in conversations with your students in a way that can give them a positive experience that also facilitates the exploration component, but it truly is also giving them a place to feel like there's an environment that is support in your advising services. So today's agenda is really just for me to cover a little bit about these unique experiences and really using how language and perspective are a great way to be thinking about working with your students. In addition to your language, how is it validating or normalizing their experience? As a first generation student, these are the pieces that oftentimes is the fish out of water experience. So we'll talk a little bit about how can you incorporate some approaches to how you work with your students and talking with them. We really look at a growth mindset as a way to think about their ability to continue to grow throughout this process. And then I'll be sharing a unique story for one of the students that I recently worked with that kind of highlights some of the process and how SHPEP was part of the big picture of how we were able to work together in his pre-health journey. And I love to have an opportunity to answer questions and create an environment for us to be able to talk a little bit about best practices, and again, how can we continue to grow our ability as pre-health advisors to best reach our students. So I'm looking forward to some of the Q&A piece as well. So before we get into that first slide, I'm going to go into my advisor story. It's a story that I've shared in other settings, and it's one piece that really has had a deep impact in my life. I can clearly pinpoint every pivotal moment in my academic career was impacted by an advisor. Starting in high school, I had an advisor who was very supportive and encouraged me to think about college. For me, going to college meant going to a local community college. And through her advice, she was the one that really pushed me to understand what, preparing to take the ACT and all those components, and then giving me an understanding of what university and college life was about. She actually shared with me back in the day VHS videotapes that I could take home and watch and see what informational video for a university was. This is before the internet, so again, they were very proactive and handing things off to us so that we could learn things even though we didn't have that unique experience. Well, fast forward that into eventually applying to college, being accepted, and then ending up at a large Big Ten university at the University of Illinois. In that same moment, in that same experience, the advisors at the University of Illinois became a place that encouraged me to think about things like the McNair Scholars Program and the Summer Research Opportunity Program. Those things were the gateways that really actually opened doors for me to understanding what graduate school was about and understanding my motivations and how to explore those options as a career. And again, keep moving forward in my profession. It was advisors in my graduate training as well that have helped me really fine tune what was my unique interest and where do I want to take my career to the next level. So advisors are a very critical piece in the educational training ground across universities. We think about education being in the classrooms, but education is happening in the career centers and the pre-health advising office. We're all part of the bigger mission of these institutions to get students not just in their goals academically, but also to attain some of their dreams. So this is really our goal, is to how do we be of service to our students in a way that is genuine. So with that story about the impact of advisors in my life, it really has had a deep impact on how do we use language and gain perspective of the student's experience. As we talked about earlier, is that oftentimes some students may feel that our role is to be gatekeepers. Who do we choose to help more than others, or then how do we disseminate information? And oftentimes our language is really the thing that's giving that message, even though it's not our intentions. Our goal is to really think about how language really does put that piece in front of a student. So the way that I think about it is, does your language, create a space where students feel like, oh, I can go to them, I can go to my advisor, they're a place where I can hear motivational stories of like, I can do this, and it inspires me? Or are you the place that really sometimes students leave wondering, was that a supportive experience for me? Did it really provide me an opportunity to leave there inspired and not feel more overwhelmed than I came in? I like using the example of post-bac programs because those are very tough conversations, and most of you will have those conversations, but this applies, again, working with students. And when we're talking about first generation students that come from a diverse set of backgrounds, especially if they're low socioeconomic, any of those pieces, typically what that means is that they have not had the experience of understanding what the process is. And at the same time, the unique challenges that they will be facing. So when we talk about post-bac programs, does it provide a place for them to feel like, yes, even though a post-bac approach might take a little bit longer in my journey, do they leave your office motivated, or are they looking at facing a hill upward battle when they leave your office and now in these virtual offices? So again, thinking about what your language and how you're presenting your conversation to your students can really have a big impact. I like to talk about taking inventory of resources and support. So when you talk to your students, are you getting a chance to see where is their sources of information? Is it all coming from online? Have they started talking to their friends, and do they have family members? This is the true place where you are always can engage in the exploration piece, because that's going to be a good sense of what is it that they're using as a motivation, not just their story and understanding their own personal motivations, but what other pieces are they using, resources that are helping them connect the dots and what their next step should be, what the myths and pitfalls could be along the way, because there's a lot of information online. There's also a lot of resources online that can sway students in a unique direction. So your office is really the place where you can have some candid conversation. So by taking just a simple approach of asking them something like, sort of, tell me about your motivation to pursue and how have you learned about this process so far? So again, that gives you a sense of what are their typical tools that they're using on a day-to-day basis. And that gives you a place to say, okay, these are our tools that are going to get you to the same place. But again, it brings some synchronicity to your resources, whether it's a pre-health course or eventually to a seminar. Those are the things that you can guide students to use your resources more efficiently. With today's modern age and class management platforms like Canvas and Piazza and all these unique, Blackboard, et cetera. Again, how are you incorporating students and bringing them into your resources, and how can talking about SHPEP is a very unique program, getting them to think about all the different exploration pieces of all the health professions that SHPEP does try to get. So it's not just a program focusing on medicine. And then looking at the support system can be very insightful as well. Oftentimes we assume that they may not have a support system, or we may think of their experience being very tough, but you start to realize that they actually do have their support systems. It's just not the traditional support systems that we see on a day-to-day basis sometimes. So those conversations can really allow you to explore with students about what is it that they have as a support system and how are they going to move forward. In that process, then how do we use the conversation with students to think about validating their story? When you are thinking about their stories, is that this is the first time that they might be sharing a lot of key things on your campus about who they are, where they come from. And the SHPEP program brings the students to your door. They are requested to submit a letter of recommendation. And we were talking about this as we developed this session, is that students, if they're applying their first year, they have one semester to connect with you, to develop some sort of relationship and request a letter of recommendation. That could be a pretty daunting experience. How do you facilitate that? We identify techniques, and one of the things that we share about is how do we present this as an opportunity to all students, as a way for them to be thinking about, does this program apply to me? We shouldn't be the ones that decide, oh, this is a student that this program is meant for, because if a student hasn't disclosed certain information, we may not know, and they might be an ideal candidate for SHPEP. So working with all your students and getting these points of interest can say, okay, this student fits like they have a lot of the experiences or the pieces that would make them a strong candidate. And you're not going based on the traditional just race or low socioeconomic status, first generation. Again, there's a lot of different definitions of diversity that the SHPEP really tries to incorporate, to bring a diversity of healthcare professionals and training and inviting them to be exploring health professions. The normalizing piece I really want to explore with you all, because it is a place where we often use our language because of what we hear and what we read, right? So low socioeconomic status oftentimes automatically comes loaded with a lot of negative interpretations of what that means to have that experience. And so how do we use that in a way to say, that's actually a unique experience. That's something that you bring to the picture. That's something that is valued. This is what these programs are looking for. This is what the field of medicine needs. By validating their story and normalizing their experiences and saying, these are unique challenges that many people will face, but your unique challenges is going to grow and become your own story. And how do we get them to understand that this is not something as a disadvantage, and our goal is to be a support system for you so that you bring something unique to the picture. One of the strategies that I often use is sharing with students, especially to my first year students, is saying at Georgia Tech and at most of the institutions that you are going to, most students are taking tutoring. Even the 4.0 students are going to tutoring, and that opens up their eyes right away, because they never thought about that. Going to tutoring might be something that they didn't have to do in high school. They're great students. They earned their right to be at this institution. That's another very unique statement that I would like to tell every student. I remind them, they are here because they've worked very hard. It's a very rigorous institution. We worked here. We're talking underlying, imposter syndrome, things that they are managing for the first time. They're stepping out of their own comfort zone. And so how is our language really providing, adding to the picture, and them gaining an opportunity to grow versus seeing that they're facing more and more challenges? And the value of this is that also you really demonstrate a genuine interest, and you're really being aware of your biases that you're bringing to the picture. This is my favorite slide and point to really highlight. In the world of pre-health advising, oftentimes there's so much focus on, just like the students, a checkbox mentality of, GPAs and MCATs and, clinical hours and, extracurriculars, all those pieces. But there is an underlying key tool that you can all incorporate into your interactions with students, especially if they are first generation or exploring college, is that you have the key to helping them understand the culture at your institution. My favorite example was as an undergraduate, I mentioned earlier, I attended the University of Illinois. at Urbana-Champaign. At that time, it was considered one of the largest Greek systems in the country. And for me, coming out of a small suburb of Chicago and being able to step into a campus that's predominantly Greek, it really threw me out because it was something that was foreign to me, and definitely oftentimes made me feel that it wasn't my culture and my values. And so therefore, I had to quickly find what were the places to support, multicultural centers. And so thinking about your partnerships across campus, who are you learning to connect with so that you can reach out to the populations that really can help diversify the health professions? They are out there, and it's really our goal to say how to continue to grow our collaborations across our campus partners and sometimes even our community partners, because we may be needing to also be part of the pipeline to help high school students explore and understand why your institution might be a great place for them to prepare their journey and explore medicine. And so when we think about the cultures, I want you to all think about it, the unique cultures, because there are very cultures. There's layers of cultures, not just one Georgia Tech culture. There's also the culture in the physics department versus the culture in the psychology department. And so how are we helping students navigate conversations with professors? How are they helping them understand what are the expectations for office hours? And even as simple as drafting an email to a professor can be something that they feel like they can write an email that might be very similar to a text, versus understanding that there's now a professional culture that they're learning about and how to navigate those pieces. And so again, these are all the keys that you hold as advisors that you can choose to use or may realize that have not realized that they could be a place where you can have an impact in many of our students. So as you look at these component, thinking about how do you develop resources and tools to help students navigate your own resources, your campus resources, and the professional interactions that they'll have on the campus. And so what this leads to is really how do we give students an understanding, and again, it cuts across the board for working with students from all different backgrounds, is that how do you instill a growth mindset that this is a goal in their careers and in their undergraduate timeline, as a way to grow and learn about themselves? How do we incorporate critical reflection as part of who they are and understand that they are a whole person? It's not just about their academics or about their background, but also their wellness and their well-being. So how does your organization or your office think about the students' well-being as part of the conversation that you have with them? How are you today? Are you having access to connecting with friends and family? We are all in a place still trying to figure out what this pandemic has changed our world in higher education. And students who often already feeling pretty isolated through the pandemic, if they have left a very strong support system, they could be in a place where they're often are facing unique challenges. And so again, how do you give them a sense of empowerment through understanding their opportunities to grow from these opportunities? So the application process for SHPEP has truly been a foundation for opportunities to connect with students. And as we get a chance to talk about exploring why is it that you're interested in medicine, have you looked at other health professions and all these different tools, it really is a place to begin their own self-reflection. The application, in a lot of ways mirrors their future application to medical school and any of the other health professions, writing personal statements, collecting letters of recommendation. And so again, this creates a genuine environment for you to have some in-depth conversations with your students around how they explore their health professions, but then again, how have their experiences led them to where they're at right now, and how they can then begin developing or identifying experiences that they want to add to their undergraduate career as part of their preparation for a career in medicine, right? When you think about exploring minors, when you think about the skills and tools that they can develop, second languages and third languages, as things that they want to take with them to medical school, then they start seeing that they have some power to say, this is why I'm motivated. These are the key things that I feel are critical in my growth and learning. And it's okay to have candid conversations about challenges in writing and challenges in communication as a way to grow, and saying this is a professional world, and my job is to help you navigate these obstacles as a way for you to be prepared for the application process. And that really allows you to then transition. One of the things that my colleague Josie and I and my colleagues here at SHPEP talking about This session is really talking about the competencies for AAMC. That's really given us a nice outline. And while many of the health professions have these competencies they're looking for, it allows you to have a nice conversation with students about these are the qualities that they're looking for. And what are the things that you've already done that demonstrate this? And quickly they'll start seeing that, oh, there is a lot of things that I already bring to the picture. So when we think about it, oftentimes it allows us to really highlight how resiliency and adaptability is going to be one of the things. Their transition to college, their ability to be comfortable asking for help, their understanding that working collaboratively, and those are all the component things that they're going to have an opportunity to grow. And as they hit any obstacles, it's not that the obstacle is a bad thing, but it's how can the obstacle help you grow and learn to become a better scholar, to become a better clinician, to be a better student. So again, those are the pieces that how do we give students the language and understanding and knowledge so that as they prepare in their journey, they're able to develop a strong application. So I love to introduce you all to Derek. He is one of my students. He's also former president of our MAPS chapter at Georgia Tech. And you know, the process with Derek was a place to really connect with him. The SHPEP application was the way that I was able to connect with Derek and say, there's a program you should keep an eye out for and look at this closely and come and chat with me. And that really created a place for Derek and I to learn his story. It really was one of the places where I heard his story. I knew it had to be told. And I know that his first year, you know, his application could probably use a little bit more polishing. But again, we're trying to get students to get to the place so that they are doing out the work. So I always remind Derek about he's always done the hard work. And so that's really the piece that I give him credit for his work. Along the way, when he requested his letter of recommendation, again, I mentioned earlier, that's one of the pieces that many students will come to you. It really opens the door for you to sit down and say, tell me about yourself. Where has your journey been and how has it come here and join me today? And it really became a unique place to connect. It really allowed me to see a unique humbleness that our students bring to the picture. Oftentimes, when we hear their stories, it becomes our own motivation as well to be able to see how can we really support students in a way that empowers them. And so it really gives you a location to really, you know, ask them, how did they really test this process? How do they really come to a way to confirm their motivations? And it really takes time for them to process sometimes to connect the dots that really were meaningful for them. And so, you know, one of the things that Derek shared with me recently was just the fact that this process really was a place that helped him understand how to better tell his story and to really feel empowered by that. And again, his reflection about how not being accepted the first year he applied to SHPEP and being accepted the second time really was a growing process for him. And it really, really did mirror for him how he was going to be ready for the application process. And again, that really allowed me to really embrace his story, allow him to instill a growth mindset, and at the same time, continue to explore what are the ways that I can support this student in a unique way that, you know, is very different from other students, that every student does bring their unique story, and how do you help them connect the dots for them so that they can be a competitive applicant. I want to go back and just simply say, you know, highlighting that growing that critical self-reflection is going to be something that happens, and we can't expect every student to be at the same place. And so how do we grow that ability to reflect and journal and understand their experiences in a way that down the road, they're going to be more comfortable, more self-aware and professional about the stories that they share that show growth and learning, versus them feeling like they might not want to share things because they might feel different. So again, the application process really for SHPEP really allows you to prepare your students for the future of what they will be doing for applying professional programs. As I mentioned earlier, I really would like to be an opportunity for us to have a unique conversation or ask questions. At this point, I'm open to any questions that you may have, or if people want to share their experiences, and also invite my colleagues to add to the points that we've been talking about.
Francisco, there's a question in the chat, and it says from one of our participants, One obstacle I've encountered with many social economically challenged students is messaging from the parents that a stumble or a struggle means that they should turn away from that challenge rather than embracing it as an opportunity for growth. How do you combat that fixed mindset from parents?
I first of all want to say thank you for asking that question, because one of the practices that I have embedded in my approach is working with students and their parents. Any student can invite their parents to their appointments with me. We know there's a simple FERPA form that they sign off saying that they're okay with us talking about it. 99% of the time, we're not even talking about their grades. We are actually talking about this process, because as you hear a student's story, that could be something that, even with students who have parents or physicians, are saying, don't be a doctor, don't be a doctor. I know this reality, you don't want to be in this world. And the student's like, I want to be a doctor. On the flip side, if a parent doesn't know the process or the journey, they may have some of the same myths that some of our students have, is that if you don't have a perfect 4.0, you're not getting into medical school. So they could be adding to that same pressure versus realizing that there is more than one path, there is more than one journey, that it isn't a race to get into medical school, but rather growing who you are so that you are prepared for the demands and challenges of this profession. And again, use the pandemic as a way to highlight to students, this is the real world. How are you going to be prepared for these demands? And talking to the parents, there's no rush for them to go straight from undergrad if they want to save money for the application process, save money for medical school. It's okay to take and grow and learn and become an adult working in the real world of life and real world of work. And these are all great ways that having those conversations with parents to understand that there's multiple paths can really open up the opportunity. And again, bring back that parent support, because that is a big obstacle when the student's not feeling that support at home as well.
And I think sometimes, and I'll chime in on this just a little bit, but I think also it's preparing the students, their relationship is changing, right? They've gone from high school to now the university. And so now it's dialoguing with their parents. And being a first generation college student, I'll tell you, I didn't want to come home and talk to my mom. Or how do I talk to my parents, right? So sometimes making an appointment with Francisco and saying, can we role play what possible scenarios and how can I be like the pre-meeting before the meeting to meet with your parents?
Yes.
And having, at our institution, we have a college for knowledge for parents, because they're transitioning also, trying to understand the university, the educational system. On top of that, you're throwing in the whole pre-health thing. So I know that we do a lot of like prep before they go meet with their parents, or we offer, and many times our students might be bilingual and their parents might be monolingual. We partner with our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office, and we'll bring someone who can also, let's say, interpret for the parents who's gone to medical school. And then also the support for the student, where they might have a peer, going through SHPEP. It's a very close-knit program. They know each other, is that they also need support. And they might have been through it already, explaining it to their parents. So there's a lot of support there. But yeah, absolutely. That comes up all the time. That's a wonderful question.
Yeah, another question has come in. I see that there's a question about selling the postbac as a reasonable path to students who have already accumulated a huge amount of debt, especially since there are many health professions that may still remain open. Yeah, that is, and I think, thank you for bringing the finances piece as well, because that is a rabbit hole that sometimes when you don't understand financing your higher education, students can accrue too much that may impede them from actually being able to enroll in medical school, because some medical schools are very proactive about saying there's a limit. There are some guidelines that say there isn't going to be the student's not going to be eligible for certain loans at a certain point. And so that's the component. When can you guide students to understand the cost and the investment in time? To me, it's not about selling them the post-bac, but rather understanding the value that they're doing. My approach typically is to remind them that there are these very structured programs that oftentimes, is an additional extensive cost. But what we fail to often look at is what are the unique opportunities that they can do that can really expand their time. Again, it's not a race to get into medical school. And most institutions that I've been at, they have very strong, if they don't have their own medical school, they have very strong research opportunities. So it is possible for a student to be doing research for a year or two and then be taking courses at your institution, upper level biology courses to strengthen their GPA, continue to confirm that their motivations are, but they're actually earning money to have MCAT prep materials, to build stronger relationships for letters of recommendation, to save and maybe pay off some of those student loans before they go to medical school, so they can extend building their prerequisites or their coursework or strengthening their GPA on an unstructured approach and taking courses as a non-degree seeking student or a special student at a university that can help them again strengthen their GPA. So letting them know there's multiple options, little by little, they begin to see, well, what is my timeline? I've seen students go through that process and they take 4 years taking coursework, they're working in research, getting that clinical experience. And that's medical schools see that the student has been working and really passionate, and they turn things around, the consistency showing competitive grades in upper level, biology-based courses. The post-bac program is a challenge because, you're asking someone to commit a full year or sometimes 2 years of additional time and not just the cost, but time. And so oftentimes it's really seeing what is going to be their own unique journey so that you can best advise and putting all the options. Our role is not complete if we're not letting students know all the potential pathways along the way.
Excellent. So we've had a couple more questions come into the Q&A tab. So thank you all for submitting those questions. The most recent one that we've received was actually expressing kind of the opposite end of the coin. I know we had someone express that sometimes they work with families or parents who have kind of a fixed mindset and not really able to see the possibilities of going into medicine. And this individual noted that some parents are in fact very insistent that their students go into medicine regardless of their qualifications. And they suggested that it's challenging to determine if medicine is the student's passion or whether it's something that they're trying to do to fulfill their parents' interests. So have either of you had any of those types of situations in terms of helping the student realize if medicine or another health profession is truly what they want to do and not something that they are trying to pursue because of influence or pressure from their family?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've experienced working with, several students where, the family pressure is to be a doctor. And so, but is that enough to sustain you in this whole process, right? But ultimately, again, it's kind of a growth process in finding out what they like, what they don't like, and how to have that dialogue with their parents. And an extreme example, I worked with a student who was really pressured by the family to do well and go into medicine, was accepted to medical school. And this is an extreme, and it breaks my heart because it was an Asian American student, got in, parents really wanted him to go to medical school, was a third year, and really wanted to drop out, but found no way to drop out. And ultimately, when we talk about mental health issues, this particular applicant committed suicide because they felt they didn't have any other choice. So having those dialogues about mental health early, talking about, taking ownership of this process, because doing it for your parents or family members or competitiveness in your family is not going to sustain you through the process. And ultimately, if you do it and you're unhappy, if you walk away your third year, you walk away with debt, right? So you may walk away with $300,000 of debt and no degree. So we want to have those conversations early. And, I think the beauty of having the whole holistic review of an applicant now, I've been advising for over 20 years. It was GPA and MCAT, it got you in somewhere. But now it's like, okay, what is the mental health issues when they get into medical school? And we train those undergrads to think about those things, realize what the stress is. Let's deal with this now as an undergrad and talk about it, that if you do this process for others, generally it's not going to sustain you enough.
Thank you so much for bringing up that critical piece of the discussion and making sure that we're addressing the mental health of our students and making sure that they're prepared for that, not only in their undergraduate years, but also knowing that going through the medical education is challenging. So they need to have a way to address those things as they go through their education as well, and that they're really paying attention to their wellness throughout. So thank you so much for bringing that particular piece of it up. As well as addressing with your students that it isn't just the MCAT or the GPA, but that admissions officer now taking this more holistic approach, and for them to kind of realize that it takes some of the pressure off of themselves. So I have a question for both of you. We have a little bit more time here. Obviously, the topic that you brought up is probably a difficult conversation to have with students, but I'm wondering, over your years of experience in working with pre-health students, what has been some of your biggest challenges when having these exploratory conversations with students, with helping them figure out which health profession do I want to pursue, which one is right for me? How do you help them navigate that in determining which one will be the best fit?
I can jump in and talk a little bit about how, there's a lot of different approaches. If you look at appreciative advising, dreaming, giving them opportunity, a blank slate, give us a place to start. Even the conversation about your major, what is a place that really motivates you about this major? What is it about it? They have an idea of who they are and what they are excited about. And that's the place that you can really begin building with a conversation with a student. Say, okay, what is it, the unique pieces that for them, first of all, helps them understand what are their qualities and traits and values that may fit very well with the profession. And then how do you incorporate additional tools? There are a lot of career advising tools, whether it's the Myers-Briggs or different personality and interest traits. Again, those are just ways to open up the door for conversations to say, are you looking at the bigger picture? They are been very resilient. They have many students have, especially in these unique situations, have many oftentimes already been told no multiple times. You won't be able to do this. Your GPA or your background, your experience, whatever it isn't going to get you to where you want to go. And that's really where our role is. Again, how we use our language, how do we give them that empowerment through knowledge and saying, this is, this is something that you'll get to know. And more importantly, them hearing the stories of others who have gone through this process. My involvement with the Tour for Diversity in Medicine is a really good example, where hearing the stories, not just one, but multiple stories of all different kinds of unique challenges and obstacles overcome, can empower students in a way saying, hey, if that other person can do it, I can do it too. And no matter what the influence or what the negative things that might be pushing down or holding down the student, they will overcome it. You oftentimes hear the stories of the students going back to their advisors. That was one of the things that people would say is, I went back to my high school advisor and showed them not just my college degree, but my medical degree, because they're the ones that had told me from back in high school that I would never become a doctor. So again, we underestimate this power that we have and the ability to support them or push them away. And so, that's really a place where we need to evaluate our practice.
And I think, as far as, working with students, and it's a process, and it's a lengthy process. And one thing is to reassure students, you're okay, right? Because this population is so stressed out. They're taking AP courses, dual enrollment. They're hearing myths out there about the math. They're hearing about got to have a 4.0. They are so stressed when they come in. And I think one of the biggest role as an advisor, at least I feel that my role is to unscrew them from the ceiling, calm them down, have that dialogue. Some students may be so fixated on this process and want to graduate in 4, go right into a health profession. And we know that a lot of students don't do it in 4. You want to do it when this journey is right for you. And that's where we emphasize trying to tell those students, what is it that you want? How fast do you want to go? Our students, many of them are working, they have other obligations. With COVID, they were in the same room with their siblings trying to do online classes and taking care of families. So, reassuring that these processes, these challenges, are really going to help them along the way. And I always point to those core competencies, because ultimately that's what medical schools and health profession schools are looking at. But that dialogue with them is so important. Because, and anytime I meet with a club or a student, I'll say, you know what, you're going to hear a lot of no's. You're going to hear a lot of people tell you not to do it, but let's talk about what it is that you want to do. How do you want to get there? Have there been academic challenges? And so let's talk about those things. What prevented you from doing well? Let's develop a strategy. You're not alone, right? This process, not only graduating from a university, but wanting to go into a health profession. And let's talk about your journey because you are uniquely different. And it's really important as they explore, if they decide, hey, I'm not going to medicine, but boy, that occupational therapy looks really good. And I don't have all these sciences, but I'm in a healthcare. There's so many careers that I think when we dialogue with students, when they first come in, they're fixated on certain health careers and that's what they've been told to do. And if they're first gen or they're from URM backgrounds, that may be the only thing. I mean, I think Francisco and I were talking recently about, I see a lot of students that come in and say, I want to be a nurse. And then you talk to them a little bit and they say, well, I kind of want to be a doctor, but they don't want to share that, right? And so we need to say, okay, so the impression is you think you have to be a nurse to be a doctor. Let's shoot for that doctor, profession, because that's what you say you want. You don't have to take this springboard profession and go into that other profession because it doesn't take a long time. So I think having those dialogues with these students, hearing them and listening to them as an advisor, hearing their concerns, because, we have the tools and the experience to talk to these students. I've seen students fail courses and get in, right? And students think, oh my God, that 1W, that withdrawal is going to kill me. It's like, no, let's talk about this overall holistic review. And as long as it doesn't establish a trend or a pattern, you're in good shape. So unscrewing them from the ceiling, calming them down, and dialoguing with them in a safe environment, having them come back, and then continue that process. Because these are skills they're going to take when they get into their health profession schools. And that's what they want to know is, hey, as an undergrad, what did you do when you hit a wall? What was it when you did when you were as an undergrad that you didn't have access or COVID hit? What did you do? Right? So these skills are demonstrations of what they can handle. And they're not expected to know it alone. So these conversations are ongoing. And I think as pre-health advisors, I think we're really unique in that, unlike other advisors across campus, we really develop a relationship with these students. And as they progress, we get to know them, and then they come back and give back to others.
Josie, you shared such great information on just really helping students build up their confidence and getting them to see that just because they had one, difficult time in a course, that doesn't mean that is setting their whole trajectory on whether or not they can get into a health profession or not, and just getting them to see that, hey, you could talk about how you overcame this obstacle and how you improved from there, and really just developing that relationship so they can build more confidence. So we have one more question that came in, and this one is focused on assisting students who come from a low income background, and just realizing that a lot of them depend on part-time work and really depend on that additional income, but want to get those extracurricular activities, clinical research experiences that often are unpaid. So how do you go about assisting those students who still would like to get those experiences, but also looking for the opportunity to still earn some income during that time as well?
Yeah, the great question. I love this question because it really challenges us what, in a way to have a conversation of like, what do they see as paid work, right? And the reality that paid work is just as valuable. It doesn't have to be a volunteer experience. And oftentimes they think that they need to be like a nurse assistant or phlebotomist or scribe, which again, are paid opportunities that can potentially do well. The unique piece is that they need to see, and a little bit of what Josie would say is the holistic approach, is that these opportunities, whatever they do, there'll be a letter of recommendation. So if they become the shift manager at Macy's because they have to work, are they building teams? Are they working collaboratively? Are they strengthening their communication skills or professional skills? So having them understand that the things that they do contribute to their story and an ability to learn about themselves in a way that can, in the application process, can be very important. It's knowing yourself very well. What skills did you gain from these opportunities? Because everything is a learning opportunity. We just need to show them that. My favorite example is with, Georgia Tech is very well known for engineers. And my pre-med engineers are hesitant in doing co-ops and internships because they think that somehow medical schools may see them as not committed to being doctors. And it's like, no, it's the opposite. Do these internships, do these co-ops. And yes, some of them may be paid and some of them get paid very well. And that's a way of saying it's okay to do things for work. The question is, are there other opportunities that you're missing out on that also can pay either as much or more? And transitioning them to explore all the different options, because things like scribe work and nursing assistant and those type of work during the academic years, it's impossible to do. It's hard to find on a part-time basis sometime, and they're balancing coursework, but it's a skill that they can use in the summers. And it's okay to say, I'm going to work for the summer, but I'm going to work as a scribe versus unloading semis like I did. I mean, my first summer after college was unloading semis because that's all I knew was manual labor, and I needed a summer job, right? That's why my parents said, you need a summer job. So here I was. But again, the advisor in my life was the one that said, you don't need to be unloading semis. You can apply to, McNair Scholars Program, or you can apply to these summer research programs and have a stipend, right? So there's opportunities. Now, do you want to develop your research skills, or do you want to develop your clinical skills, right? And again, that's one of the unique things that SHPEP does provide a stipend as well. So again, these are things that they don't know, but if we don't share that with them and explain to them that whatever they decide to do, even if it is a traditional job working as a server at the local restaurant, because they did that in high school, they have a long-term commitment there, having worked through high school as a host. And so now they have a strong letter of recommendation. They've learned to work with a diversity of people who aren't happy sometimes because their food isn't what this. Again, it's them understanding those competencies and how they can articulate those prior experiences in the future in their applications about who they are and the journey that they have traveled.
And that's absolutely important, because we're a source of information. And once a student becomes comfortable, they'll come to you for anything. I always tell them, even come to me, I'm a native Tucsonan. If you want to know where you want to eat, I'll tell you where, the good places are. But, the thing also, because we talk about economically disadvantaged, right? So if they filed for FAFSA and they be eligible for work study, I encourage students, we have a health sciences. We hire student workers. They love federal work study students because they get them cheaper. And you're in a department that's going to be more understanding when you have to study for midterms or finals. And you're going to connect with these folks that are connected many times with this process at our medical school or pharmacy school or nursing. And you get to know faculty. And so the idea is to balance your academic and your personal life, right? All those competencies that we have to have them achieve. And so if you can do it through an internship where you earn credit, we have internships at the University of Arizona where if you're bilingual, we have a bilingual internship that's called Faces Conversantes. We put you out at a clinic, you're attending class, you're earning upper division credit. And if you have to be full-time and you have financial aid, that's the way you balance it so that you're not taking these other hours outside of the classroom that they're built in, and you're balancing it. And if you're a work study student, then you also have an opportunity to maybe work in the res life, right? You're dealing with a diverse population, interacting with different people. So you're picking up these skills, but if you can do a campus job, we encourage students try to stay on campus because, one is if you live on campus, then you're not running around all over. But if you're doing retail, the challenge might be they're not very forgiving when it's time for Christmas. They want you to work. Whereas, if you have a campus job. So we try to be creative. And we also identify that a lot of incoming students are coming in with CNA certification, MA certification, EMT certification. And so, when COVID hit, these are the students that were able to find some clinical experience because they had these certifications. And if they could get a job, that would be great. But yeah, not to overwhelm them, but trying to be creative in, hey, let's look at how you can also earn money. And I think Francisco makes a great point. A lot of these programs, SHPEP included, have stipends. So when a student says, well, I really have to work, it's like, hey, you can get paid to go to this program and you get to travel. So, it's a best of many worlds.
And I want to add another piece to it too, is that oftentimes we're helping students get into another bubble, another world, right? And so for them to step outside of their comfort space and, you know, not just their hometown into their university, but now through like SHPEP and another culture, another campus, it really gives them a chance to really continue to grow and gain that confidence of being on their own, right? Understand that they've worked their way up through that. And oftentimes this is where I hear students say that because of their unique experiences, they've actually been able to make their families even better, because now family is able to visit them when they're in California, because now they did this unique. This is the first time their parents got a chance to travel outside of their state, because now they're the ones that are opening the doors for their own families. When students realize that they're the link to making an impact even in their own families, not just in their communities, but even their own families, can be a big empowering conversation to have, because they never realize that they're now transitioning from being a dependent to being independent, right? And now having the power to give back. And that's the other thing that we can't avoid talking about SHPEP, is that we are working with the students who are going to go back and work in the communities that are most underserved and most underprivileged when it comes to healthcare. We can talk about underserved and underprivileged in higher education. We can talk about all those areas, but these are SHPEP really targets the people who eventually, and that would be the great thing to see, how many of these students are going straight into primary care and underserved populations, how many they work with the National Health Corps Service. Again, we really have not just a commitment to these students, but to our own society, to be able to continue to build the doctors who are truly going to be giving back to the communities that are most in need.
I heard so many important elements with all the gems that both of you just shared with that response. One being that helping our students realize that there are a range of different opportunities available to them, that, you know, they shouldn't just think of one traditional way to gain experience, but a lot of the things that they're already doing are of great benefit to them, that correlate directly with those core competencies that we've been talking about, and that they also need additional awareness that they can also get paid through some of the programs like SHPEP, through the stipends and things such as that. I want to try to touch base on one more question. We have a few more minutes left before the session ends. So I want to get to this last question, and it is also connected to gaining experience. This particular advisor indicated that they actually do not work with our traditional undergraduate students, but instead work with non-traditional applicants and career changers. So programs such as SHPEP is no longer an option for them because they've already, you know, maxed out on the number of credits and such. So with consideration of what we just talked about in terms of exploring, you know, what other types of experiences students can get in order to really build their application and make sure they're strong applicants for health professions, what else would you suggest for someone that might be in that stage of their education?
So post-bac students are a very unique group of individuals, right? Because they're coming in with a degree, generally speaking, it may be science, maybe non-science. So when advising those students, I would say if they're taking courses, let's say they're catching up and they're doing the prereqs. And at our institution, we don't have a formalized post-bac program, but all of our advisors can work with post-bac students. So they'll come in, they'll talk to us. They are able to participate in other programs that we have. We have a program called Blazer. It's the Border Latino American Indian Exposure to Research. It's a 10-week summer program, gives a $3,000 stipend. And we also have Frontera, which is border health disparities. We also have, you know, so if they're an enrolled student post-bac, then they are eligible to participate in our programs here at the university. So I would encourage them to look at those. And generally speaking, you know, they want to make sure that they're either juniors or higher. So many of those programs do offer, you know, experience in health disparities, minority health, and that sort of thing. And then we do advise them as far as the courses that they're taking and how to prepare and to also be a competitive applicant. But I would say check the institution. Also, the AAMC website is wonderful with a lot of those summer programs, and they're wonderful. So I would encourage that they check it out. But the post-bacs are uniquely different in that, you know, many, they have that degree already. They're career changers. So whether I'm working with one student right now who's a post-bac, got his economics degree, is coming back to do the prereqs. So we talk about how do you want to get admitted? what opportunities, what clinical experience, and kind of do a whole survey of where they're coming from. And then we map it out. We do a timeline and we talk about when, okay, so we're going to knock off all these classes. This is when you're going to apply. You should have this amount of clinical experience at least to be able to talk about it. So, and then we meet with them on a regular basis. So.
And Francisco, did you have anything to add to that particular question?
I think the piece that really is finding out what else is going on in their life. When you're working with students that have completed their undergraduate careers, they might have families, they might have other things, and that's really the other key piece, is that there's still very traditional perspectives of what medicine is. Students are surprised to hear that medical schools have daycares, or that people get married in medical school and have families, that you can actually take a year off from medical school to have a child. So again, letting them know that these are different pathways oftentimes eliminates that pressure of like, I need to go straight and do this process. It's like, no, validating their story. This is your path, your journey. What do you want to make it? And what else are you trying to balance? You know, Josie was doing a great job talking about helping them understand that it's all maintaining a balance, and how can they continue to move forward in a way that shows that they're intentional about what they're doing, that they're being reflective about their motivations, and they can articulate their journey. And so once you kind of get to that place where they feel like, okay, I can kind of put together, then let's start building together your journey. Let's put together your path for the next year or two, and set some points to check in, right? Getting them that comfort level, that understand it's not they're just going to go away and work on it for a semester or two, but no, come in and check with me regularly as a way to continue to work together. It's a collaboration.
Excellent, excellent. So I want to thank you both for your wonderful responses. Thank you, Francisco, for leading this first presentation. And thank you, Josie, for jumping in and answering some of the questions. We are looking forward to your session in a few minutes here. Thank you for our wonderful audience members for submitting questions. We are now going to move into a few words from one of our sponsors here. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. You can hear me, right, Kimberly?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Williams. I'm the product manager for MCAT Prep. I've been at the AAMC for 3 years now, and I think a lot of you might recognize me because I have definitely spoken to the advisor community about what the MCAT Prep team has to offer, as well as the SHPEP students. So thank you for having me. And Kimberly, can we go to the next slide? Yes. This is very exciting. To assist you all with your advisees in support of SHPEP, we are raffling official PEP online only bundles. And Kimberly, I think you're going to manage how the winners are selected, yes? And then I get the fun part of announcing them.
Correct. Yes. Yes. So thank you so much, Heather, one, for donating this wonderful resource to our pre-health advisors. We're very excited about this. We know that you all really value these types of resources and being able to help your students on their journey. So the way this is going to work is I am going to read 3 different trivia questions, and the first individual to respond via chat for each one of these questions will receive one of the MCAT bundles. So I am going to read off the first question. And again, the first person to chime in via chat with the correct answer will win that particular bundle. So our first question is, what year was SHPEP established? What year was SHPEP established? And it looks like we have our first winner. And Mark.
Very nice.
Yes, Mark.
Sorry, I missed one.
All right, so we have our first winner, Mark Counterman, who responded with 1989. Yes, that is the year that SHPEP was born. So that is our first winner. Okay, so for our second question, how many health professions are included in SHPEP currently? How many health professions do we currently have represented? I see some answers coming in. I haven't seen the correct answer yet. Oh, there it is. And let me just make sure I didn't miss anyone. Selena Hernandez. She was the first person to chime in with the correct answer. So we currently have 7. I am not gonna make you call out all 7, but we do have 7 currently, which includes medicine, dentistry, nursing, optometry, physical therapy, pharmacy, and public health. So congratulations to Selena. And then for our final question, what is the name of our SHPEP newsletter? Up, and here we are. Okay, Sierra O'Donnell was the first person to chime in with the correct answer. It is SHPEP Connect. If you all aren't currently subscribed, please do so. Thank you all for participating. I am gonna toss it back over to Heather for a few more words about our MCAT products.
Okay, I think I've got those. Mark Counterman, Selena Hernandez, and Sierra O'Donnell. You got me really quick. Great job, everyone. So congratulations. Kimberly and Tony will get some contact information from you, and then my team will follow up with getting you access to distribute access to that online only bundle. But before I go, I want to share some important information from the MCAT prep team. This online only bundle that we raffled off today is one of many benefits that is a part of the AAMC fee assistance program, which we always advise students to go to. So I just want to put in another plug for the fee assistance program at aamc.org/FAP. The AAMC store advisor page is where advisors can sign up to receive a 30% discount on all MCAT prep products and learn about the tools we have to ensure that students have access to the MCAT prep products. And I can drop a link to that, to the store site in a moment into the chat. But no matter where students get their MCAT prep products, whether that's through purchasing in the store as a part of FAP benefits or through an advisor, all MCAT prep products and free resources, including the study plan guide, can be accessed in the MCAT official prep hub. And that's at aamc.org/MCAT prep. I'll also drop that in the chat. We have a video on YouTube now that gives a tutorial of all of our free resources within the hub. I can also share a link with that one. And finally, we'd love to share stories of recent students who have used Khan Academy in their MCAT preparation. And we want to do that to inspire students to use the Khan Academy MCAT collection. So we're planning on highlighting their stories in our social media and our website. So if someone you know is willing to share their story, please email us at mcatprep@aamc.org. And I'm going to drop all of those links in the chat right now, like I said I would. There you go.
Excellent.
That's it for me, Kimberly.
Oh, thank you so much, Heather. We appreciate you sharing all of the information about MCAT. I'm hoping that we get some students to share their stories, as well as some advisors to sign up to receive more information about some of our products. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So now we are going to transition into a quick break before we go into our next session. During this time for our break, we would like to learn a little bit more about what are some of your challenges within your role as a pre-health advisor. And we're going to capture some of those responses just through you chiming in via the chat. I think that your responses will help inform some of the way that our next presenter will talk about some of the challenges we all face as we're trying to work to increase diversity within the health profession. So if you all are able and willing to, please answer the question that's here on the screen. What challenges do you face as a pre-health advisor? And just chiming in via the chat. And I'm going to keep an eye on some of those responses and share, and then we will get started with our next session here within the next minute or so. So some of the responses that came in thus far is increasing student population with a decrease in budget. I feel you there. Even high achieving students seem to underestimate the process in general. So making sure our students are fully aware of all of that is encompassed within applying to a health profession, and they have realistic expectations. And communicating the importance of service. Making sure that students are adjusting if they're hitting certain challenges within their education, so that they can increase their chances of being competitive applicants. Working with community college students with limited resources. So recognizing that students are coming to us from all different backgrounds and different institutions, finding ways for students to reflect without it being required. You all can keep chiming in here. We're going to keep accepting responses probably for the next couple of minutes or so. Here's one that I think is probably pretty common here. Students or a large amount of students deciding to change their major once they fail one course instead of focusing on something they would be happy to study. So I've heard that before, where students might have that organic chemistry class and then they're like, no, what, this isn't for me, and then change their major instead of saying like, this one challenge I had in this course isn't going to predict whether or not I get into my desired health profession. So trying to figure out an alternative or parallel plan instead of just kind of giving up and going directly into the next major. Writing skills of students. So yeah, this kind of goes into some of what was shared during our Q&A period for the last session here. Really students being able to share their stories effectively, really being able to own their unique experiences and do a little bit of personal branding when filling out that SHPEP application, when filling out their applications for medical school or dental school, just really being able to express effective communication either in written or verbal form. Rushing the application process is identified as one of the key challenges here. So not devoting enough time to really prepare all of their materials, making sure they have, all of their ducks in a row, all the experience they need, that they've had enough time to work on those personal statements, and asking their recommenders to do their letters instead of putting in last minute requests. Okay, we're going to take a few more here and then we're going to transition to our next presentation. And I'm seeing here another challenge based on the types of institutions you're at, recognizing that some of the regional campuses might not have the same level of support for pre-health advisors as some of those larger institutions. And I think I even alluded to that during my short presentation at the beginning, that a lot of our abilities to provide students with adequate support depends on the level of support that we're getting from our leaders at these institutions. So definitely understand that. And also to speak to, I have also done some pre-health advising myself in previous roles prior to coming to AAMC. So if I'm speaking of like, yes, I'm part of the community, I get it. It's because I was formerly a pre-health advisor myself as well. Let me see. having difficult conversations with students who are not succeeding in the sciences, specifically organic chemistry, which I mentioned earlier, but still support their dream in going to medical school. Yes, with that challenge, I'm just gonna throw it on back to what Francisco and Josie were saying earlier about really helping students build their confidence and knowing that one failure or one no doesn't mean that a career in medicine or another profession isn't a possibility for them, helping them realize that they can bounce back from a tough time in a course that I recently heard through my conversations with our panelists today that, even our highest achieving students also receive tutoring. So even having that realization for them that, everyone is able to have, some type of difficulty and also seek the help of others to grow. So we are continuing to get a lot of different responses here in terms of the types of challenges that you are facing. I'm sure that you all are feeling some sense of relief in a way, just knowing that probably a lot of you are experiencing some similar challenges across your institutions and your roles. And I know that our next presenter will do a great job in helping you determine how to best address some of those challenges that you're experiencing. So we're going to transition into our next presentation. We have Josephine or Josie Morgan, who is the Assistant Director of the A Center, in which that center provides support to undeclared transitional students, pre-health and pre-law students at the University of Arizona. And she is coming to us today to talk about how to leverage SHPEP to diversify the health professions. So welcome, Josie.
Thank you so much, Kim. I'll tell you one, and you probably see this. I love my job. I think nowhere else will you be able to have such a diverse population you're working with and also motivated students. And it really challenges you to utilize all the tools in your toolkit as an academic advisor and also preparing these students. So I'm really excited to present on this topic of how to leverage SHPEP to diversify the health professions. I've been working with SHPEP for many years. And as I mentioned, it's one of those things in my toolkit that for freshman, sophomore students, it's a wonderful program. And so I'm going to go ahead and go into my presentation. First of all, we would like to do our land acknowledgement here at the University of Arizona. We respectfully acknowledge the University of Arizona is on land and territories of indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being a home to the O'odham and the Yaqui. Committed to diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service. So this is something that we acknowledge on our campus, is that we work with a lot of students and we're on Native lands, and we respectfully acknowledge that. So thank you. So you heard throughout the presentations, Francisco, and you're going to hear it from me also, and we tell this to students all the time, and you probably do too, is those core competencies really provide kind of a foundation, kind of a framework that we point back to when we're talking about diversifying the pipeline. And so these core competencies really help us also to support our mission in our office in working with these students who are URMs, underserved, economically disadvantaged. And so we want to make sure that we integrate this in all our conversations with our students and also anyone that we interact with. And then it also supports the workshops and things that we implement. And so with the core competencies, I also want to talk about, it's not just the AAMC, but it's also other health professions. And so with the next slide, and it ties in very nicely with SHPEP because the DO schools develop their core competencies, MCAT develop their core competencies, physical therapy, physician assistants, and general and dentistry. And so it's really good to know that all these schools, when they relooked at their programs and moved towards a more holistic review of applicants that they really wanted to say, okay, we want you to be smart, right? And so the first thing that they will be assessed on is that, are you an academic risk? And everybody's journey, as we mentioned, is uniquely different. If you had challenges your freshman year, do you have that upward trend? If you pulled that C or even failed OChem, did you pull an A in biochem? Did you pull an A in other upper division sciences? So they're looking for trends and patterns. So we all know that that holistic review allows an admissions committee to look at that, but tying in all these core competencies with all the different health professions, and SHPEP offering those health professions for these freshmen and sophomores, not only to do some exploration, but also know that across the board in the health professions, they want these health professions individuals to come out with certain skills, attributes that they're going to be utilizing in their profession. So, you know, doing the survey earlier today that Kim was asking, I'm just totally amazed at the diversity of the advisors that are here today. And I'll tell you, when I first started pre-health advising, I was the only advisor at the University of Arizona, and I only did medicine. And then as things progressed, as the institution went through some changes, they did an evaluation of our advisors. At our peak, we had 6 advisors, full-time advisors, that worked in the pre-health professions office. We're down to 4 right now due to budget cuts. And I saw that in the chat also, is, you know, how do you do all this with all these challenges, right? So, you know, we've modified things, we've taken things off our plate, we've added other things so that we could, you know, focus on larger groups and things like that. But I want to know, and I might be preaching to the choir, because what are the best practices you implement to increase diversity in the health professions from your institution? Because I think this is also an opportunity for all of us that we get to cut out a little bit of time as pre-health advisors to share what we know. And I know the wealth of knowledge is out there. And I know when we looked at that survey that many have less than 5 years of experience, but I also know there were some individuals that had well over 10, 15 years. And so I would like to hear from you, if you could put in the chat some of the things you already implement, right? And again, because some institutions are small, you may not be able to implement these programs. And I'll be talking about what we do, but we're a really big university. We accommodate 12,000 pre-health students at the University of Arizona. And these are all students from all different backgrounds, all different majors. So we're a central hub for all those students interested in going into the health professions. And then they'll work with their major advisors. But we're also, I think, ideally placed, and we're under a unit that does major exploration. So we all know that students come in many times, they might declare physiology, they might declare biology, but you know, we all know that the students who are majoring in different majors, we want them to major in those things they love, because they'll be reflective of how well they'll do. And then we integrate the sciences into the major. And so we want to make sure that that message gets out to, you know, students. But at your institution, what kind of things do you do currently as far as, you know, implementing different programs and activities? Because ultimately what I'd like to do in this session is to come up with some ideas of what can you do, a takeaway. I always believe that when you attend a meeting, you don't want to just be lectured to, and definitely I don't want to lecture, but what can we do? And also, why reinvent the wheel if another institution is doing something really neat that you could implement in your institution of the same size and the same number of students? And so we'll take a few minutes to do that. And then we'll talk a little bit about, you know, what we do at the University of Arizona. And then we'll, at the end, hopefully come up with some ideas, and then really open it up for dialogue as far as, you know, what things that could possibly you could implement for spring of 2022. So we'll take maybe another minute or so and allow you to put that into the chat. let's see what we've got so far. So assisting with MCAT materials, MESA director at a community college. Perfect. Interviewing alumni clinicians who represent diverse ethnic groups. So we're going to revisit that towards the end. But the practices, I think that, the other thing is a lot of institutions, and we did at the University of Arizona, they did a strategic plan not too long ago, and they implemented these ideas of pillars. And one of the pillars is cultural diversity and awareness. And that is, and also working with, let's say, students at the university interested in going into the health professions. So that gives us also reinforcement to implement these programs that many of our students are interested in, is that it's not only just an office mission, but it's also an institutional mission. And so that would be something to look at if your institution has something similar to that, where in their mission statement, or whether or not they did a strategic plan and reevaluated some of their diversity type of programs that are going out there. But we'll go ahead and move on. So on the next slide, I want to share with you, and this was kind of like a brain dump when I started doing this presentation. And again, when we were fully staffed, and we actually had one advisor that was dedicated specifically for diversity and working with those students. And so, and that person actually was me. And so prior to taking the role as a coordinator of our department, I wanted to work with underserved, underrepresented populations and economically disadvantaged. So I made a conscious decision on how to do that outreach. And one thing that I would like to note, when we talk about strategies, tactics, and opportunities for increasing diversity, one thing that I've noticed is that many institutions, when they do have, let's say, a mission where it's going out and working with diverse populations or underserved populations, many times a new person is assigned to that task. One thing I believe, that if an institution is truly aligned with that mission and really believes on achieving that mission, and you heard earlier in Francisco's presentation and also the Q&A, is that working with students who are first generation, underrepresented, economically disadvantaged, they run into a lot of different scenarios and challenges. And it really takes, I think, a special individual who has the training, and knowing that those that are attending this session, many are less than 10 years as far as experience, but that high turnover in our pre-health advisor at different institutions, is that if you're truly committed to diversity, you give the person that has the most skills to work with the population, because then they're familiar with the institution, they're familiar with community organizations, clubs and organizations, they're pretty seasoned. And I'll give you an example in my role, because we know that it isn't all just as far as support, that it isn't just the academic piece, as you heard earlier, that really supports these students. But what works really well, and I partner very closely with our Indians into Medicine program here at Arizona, is that we have a clinical psychologist. We also have someone who is the PI and coordinator of the program, and she's well established within the community. She's well established statewide, national-wide for programs and services. And then I come in with the academic piece. So if a student in our institution, for instance, if they did, let's say they didn't do well in organic chemistry, right? And many institutions have a process called grade replacement. And so that's where a student can retake a class and they'll replace the better grade with the bad grade. And that for our institution, we always tell the students and remind them that, if you grade replace a course, and the biggest question to those students would be, why did you not perform well? What was going on? Were you working? Was it COVID? Was it situational? Or did you not learn the material that you can't move on? But if it was where the student, let's say, pulled a C in a class, and many of our students many times feel that if I got a C, I'm going to retake the course. But to remind that student that if you retake the course and you're applying to medical school, they will look at both grades, even if your institution has what is called a grade replacement opportunity. And so is it that you retake the course, or did you learn the material to move on to do biochem or genetics or something upper division? Is it somewhere where you take a course and you retake a course and it starts to establish a trend, right? So for the admissions process, they're looking to see, are there trends and patterns in your academic coursework? Like, did you sign up for 20 units and then you drop a class every semester? Again, what are the skills and traits that you're doing as an undergrad will apply to your success in medical school? So we want to have those kind of dialogues with those students. And I believe when we're talking about increasing diversity in the health professions, is that you really need to have a person who's skilled in assisting that students in many different venues, right? We talk about mental health, we talk about academics, we talk about the things they have to do to apply. So we try to catch them early on. And so one of the first things that we do is, and we've done this over the years, even before SHPEP, but when it was MMEP, SMDEP, but every new student has to come through orientation. Every transfer student has to come through orientation. So we really promote SHPEP for those freshmen, sophomores. So this is generally the first time that they've heard about it. We're invited to every tabling and exhibit. So we definitely, like this weekend, or actually next week, one of my advisors will be going up to the Phoenix area because it's a health-related outreach event for high school students and parents. We have our annual SHPEP workshop, which was yesterday, and we bring back alumni can share their experiences. We leverage any admissions because we're always part of admissions, whether it's recruiting, outreach, talking to parents, athletes that come visit on campus. If it's also like for any scholarships, like the Flynn Scholars or anything like that with Honors College, Prehealth is always invited. So we do a lot of outreach for students who are not enrolled at the U of A, planning to come to the U of A, plus the students that are at U of A, and then also, as we talked about earlier, post-bac students. Generally speaking, what we do also in the beginning of the semester, like in August, we strategically attend all the URM and clubs and organizations. So we met with our African Americans in Life Sciences, our Fostering and Achieving Cultural Equity and Sensitivity Club. And so anything that has a diversity focus, and plus some of our other general clubs like AMSA or AED, we go to those meetings the first 2 weeks. And we share the information about SHPEP and our SHPEP workshop. And so we get the word out in that way. The other thing that we do is we establish our national partnerships. Like I mentioned, we have our Arizona Indians into Medicine program. Their goal and their mission is to work with pre-health students who are from indigenous backgrounds. And so we partner with those students. We also have cultural centers on our campus. So we have 4 different cultural centers and we have a transfer center. So we actually, when we were fully staffed, were able to go out to the cultural centers, do on-site advising at those cultural centers. So one of the things I think as far as key pieces of any of these programs that we do is we go out to the students, that we don't wait in our office waiting for them to make an appointment, but get to know them in that venue. We'll be at welcome events from our cultural centers where all their students are coming in with their parents when the beginning of the semester. We leverage utilizing our diversity, equity, and inclusion offices. We have 2, one on main campus for the main campus, and then we have one at our health sciences. And we are on a lot of listservs, not only just NAP, but also we have a local Arizona Health Sciences Center working group. So these are majors in the sciences. These are College of Medicine, pharmacy, nursing. So we partner very closely with them. And one thing that we utilize a lot is our students. So we actually have our pre-health ambassadors. And just like any admissions committee, when they go through a cycle and they say, okay, what is our class going to look like? What do we want it to reflect? there's always SHPEP students in our, or have gone through SHPEP as far as our ambassadors. And so that way they know the program, they share it with the other ambassadors. We do a selection every spring. And so those ambassadors actually select the next group of ambassadors. So this spring, we'll probably lose about 4 or 5 students due to graduation. They become the admissions committee. They actually review the applications, and we do a multiple mini interview process, and we did it virtually. So we had a 10-station MMI, and these students are the interviewers. And at one point, they were the ones that were being interviewed. So we want to instill those core competencies in with them and share with them any process of the application process. So those are some of the things that, that we've done at the University of Arizona. But I know that a lot of you have done very similar things, and then hopefully we can come up with some ideas. So this is my question would be, how do you plan to leverage SHPEP as far as diversifying the health professions? What are some of the creative ideas that you might have heard today, or things that you might want to expand if you're already doing something that you can expand this program? I think the beauty of having SHPEP is that it's already packaged. Kim and Tony and Harold, they're all there to support getting this word out to students. It's a wonderful program, and it's easily integrated to any event as far as like sharing that information. And so I would say, think about 1 or 2 ideas that you would like to share in the chat about what you would like to see maybe in the spring. One thing is, I know that you're attending this session because you want to talk about how to diversify, and then also utilizing SHPEP into your programs. So definitely throw out some ideas. Let's see what's out there. And then we can open it up for Q&A. Nice. Maps is very popular. I mean, hitting the clubs is always really good because that's your captive audience. And, especially knowing that as pre-health advisors, there's a lot of misconceptions out there and inaccurate information. And anytime you can clarify anything, working with those clubs and organizations, I think is always really beneficial. So think I'd like to go ahead and open it up for Q&A, Kim.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your presentation today, Josie. You shared some great information about some of the strategies you've been able to implement at the University of Arizona. Just as Josie mentioned, I know that you all have also done some great things at your institution. So be sure to continue to include some of those things in the chat, as well as if you have any specific questions for our presenter today, please include those questions in our Q&A tab. I did jot down a few questions myself that I thought about as you were going through your presentation. So I'll start off with those, and then we can monitor the Q&A tab and see what else comes in. But as you were talking about some of the things that you do in terms of collaborations across campus, I was reflecting on some of my previous experiences in higher ed, and just thinking about sometimes, depending on the institution I was at, different offices kind of worked in silos. And it wasn't as easy to form those connections sometimes. So just wanted to ask you, did you have any strategies in terms of building those cross-campus collaborations on your campus? Because you had a whole list of different, organizations and offices that you worked with. And I was just wondering what strategies that you implement in order to really establish that very lengthy plan to leverage those connections.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that again, you're right. Every institution is so uniquely different. At the University of Arizona, one thing that we really utilize a lot is our UPAC listserv, which is all the professional advisors across the campus. There's well over 200 different majors, and definitely each one has their own advisors. They meet monthly, and we always get put on the schedule at least once a semester if things are changing. But that's a wealth of information because we know that students not only major in sciences, but non-sciences. We have public health, we have care health society. And so we can target those advisors, and then they in turn send out the information. So, and I'll use one example that worked really well. We established, and really this idea came about because of our ambassadors. So our first set of ambassadors came up with this idea called Prehealth Information Blast. We have 4 rotations. They're really quick. It's almost like speed dating, right? We have 4 different groups. We have panelists for each one of those groups. So we have a panel of admissions people like College of Medicine, dentistry, and physical therapy. We have first year health profession students. So they're going to talk about their experience. We talk about clinical experience. Where can I get clinical experience and that sort of thing. And then we have another panel. Let's see. So it's admission. Oh, faculty. How do I get to know faculty? How do I ask for a letter of rec? And this program is targeted for freshmen and sophomores. They're all asking the same question. How do I get clinical experience? How do I get to know what admissions committees really want? How's it feel to be a first year, right? So this event we had actually on November 20th, and we used to have it in person. So we actually were physically located, and it always maxed out at 200 people. And so, we would feed them, they would come to this workshop, and the UPAC, once they threw it out there, that session was filled within 3 days. And so anytime we have an event, we always get a really good turnout. And then now we're recording a lot of it, of course, because of COVID and having access. But when we did in-person things, people would turn out in droves. And so wanting to know the information, they're out there. So definitely, these partnerships work really well. The other idea is that, these partnerships, they have a mission and objectives that they need to achieve, right? And we have a mission that we need to achieve. What's the best way than to target those individuals and work on these committees together? But the UPAC listserv, if you have at your institution several different advisors, because we know that they're not all science majors, is that you get them together. And then you also bring them up to speed on what the process looks like.
Excellent. So I heard 3 different tips there that you all should probably write down and note to implement at your institutions. If you don't already have some type of listserv established where you can communicate across campus and kind of share some of these opportunities for partnerships, definitely look into either utilizing that or establishing that at your school. In addition, I heard working with some of the student ambassadors. Our students are so creative, so making sure we're tapping into their ideas and expertise. And then the last area I think is very important in terms of partnerships is connecting the dots and trying to figure out what are those common goals and how can we be in alignment to achieve both of our goals. So that is great information. Francisco, I see that you have joined us again. Do you have any additional advice this year in terms of establishing those partnerships at your school and really focusing on cross collaboration to work towards these goals of increasing diversity?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we need to really continue to develop our relationships with our faculty as well. Again, they are a touch point, where students see them for their content knowledge, maybe their research, but they have the ability to also connect with students in a unique way. They're already going to get letters of recognition. They're trying to build relationships. So what I also noticed over my time in years is that a lot of the clubs gravitate to the pre-health advisor as the advisor for their club. And what we're really are pushing is faculty to be advisors for clubs so that we can build a relationship with the faculty to help support the club. But then that advisor, that faculty member then starts to really understand the pre-health reality, right? Oftentimes they're still working on pre-2015 MCAT, right? Understanding what the MCAT is the application process. They're still wanting to write letters of recommendation, you know, in the old process. Again, we also then get to see what is it that our partners across campus understand the pre-health world, because they say, oh, that's a pre-health thing. Go see the pre-health advisor. And it's like, no. Let's use this as an opportunity so that I can share with you what the students need. That's really a good way, is a process to look at the relationships that your campus begins to understand the value of supporting students in a very different way. They also can begin thinking about you as a resource in a different way, because they can do a referral. It's not just here's Francisco and his email or his drop-in hours, but they can start now giving you a little bit of heads up and saying, this student is struggling with X, Y, and Z in the classroom. And it's like, oh, that's information that maybe the student might not have shared with me. And again, what is the context of the situation for each student so that we can best support them and say, hey, we're here as a community, you know, how are things going with your class? We're able, it gives us reasons to really connect on the academic side, since if we're not in that teaching role with them, it really allows us to give them that understanding. So I think those are kind of key pieces to be thinking about. How do we work with our partners to support our community?
And I think faculty are key, because, you know, also giving them a little bit more as far as, you know, responsibility, encouraging students to have them read their personal statement. So, you know, prior to COVID, we had, you know, a pre-health advisory council. And so students sit on that also. So our ambassadors will select 2 that sit on it. But we'll have, you know, faculty from non-science areas like Africana studies, or, you know, American Indian studies, or, you know, psychology, definitely the science folks, right? So then we have those so that we can talk about what are the issues that are facing our students, you know, and then also, you know, meet to just share information, because they have great information also about, you know, other programs that that they're in charge of. But yeah, they're usually faculty advisors for their clubs too. So, you know, just getting them connected and really dialoguing and taking, you know, the misconceptions out of the whole process, and sharing the wealth, sharing the accurate information with individuals.
So kind of building off of that last question, I'm interested to know if you all have worked to develop relationships with external partners as well. And if so, what did you find most effective in doing so?
Well, I think because, you know, being in Arizona, again, we have our native population. And also when we talk about the lack of access, and those represented in the health professions who are indigenous is even lower. I mean, it's less than 1%, right? And so we really need to do better, because health disparities in our tribal nations is really dismal. And so we have to make sure. So one of our partnerships nationally is with our American Indian Physicians Association. And then we partner to do an annual spring conference with them. And so the Four Corners region, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, we do a Four Corners and we rotate the site. And we actually fly the students in. The AAIP, you know, sponsors it. And we go through all the whole process of the application process, mock interviews, personal statements, and they take students from across the country. So it's not just, you know, just those Four Corners, but they'll take students from New York, Minnesota. So we do a lot of national connecting, just like SHPEP, right? National programs. And these are programs that are gems for these students. So I think, you know, being able to connect with national programs also gives you a lot of credibility, because we want our students to be representative nationally, not just in their own hometown, but, you know, when they go on to be a doctor, to be representative of their communities at their level when they're professionals.
I think, you know, in the professional setting, what is our role as professional advisors? We have a lot of focus right now on what we can do with students and developing things to support our students. one of the things that we have to always think about, and Black Lives Matter really put this into perspective. What are the structural pieces that are impeding us to be able to have that impact that we really want to do? Because there's a lot of structural pieces. If you look at any organization, what are the points where there are gaps and miscommunication, all those pieces? So how do we align these organizations in a way they collaborate? That's the element piece where, to create some of this change, it's not just about putting everything on the student and making, educating the student and putting everything on the students. Who are we as an institution? We're talking about even like land acknowledgements and, the missions that our strategic planning that our organizations do. How do we leverage those opportunities to change the structures within not just our institutions, but the organizations that we're involved with? And I think that's the next layer that we'll begin thinking about, is that piece really allows us to think about not just these programs that can be accessible to students, but again, collaboration. We're constantly fighting the lack of budgets, right? The lack of funding for these programs. And again, they've been created pipelines and they've been often referred to as leaky pipelines, because again, we are working with the students that have really, kind of risen to the top at a certain point. There's a whole nother layer of students that we have not tapped into. And, when we look at the challenges that the community colleges face, when you look at diversity exists at the community college level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what are we doing to change that transition from students from the community college to the four-year institutions? And how are we challenging these health professional programs as well to understand that not everybody's going to continue to have that same path and journey, but also then putting some of that pressure back on institutions to create the support systems to help continue to support the students that are going to have that impact, because that's exactly what happened. When we talk about the reports and the purpose of this whole thing is that since the 1970s, the number of students that are applying from African American males hasn't shifted. What happened to all these initiatives that happened since through the 70s and the 80s? I mean, you can easily see through the 90s and 2000s, everything is being dismantled, right? All the resources, all the funding went down. So, these medical schools and health professional programs had more funding to be able to have an impact and reach out to the communities. So again, it's a process of rebuilding again and seeing how we continue to change structures now that may actually be impeding access.
Yeah, and I think, using those institutional, strategic plans and, when they revamp, and for us, it's those pillars, is that, and we talk about the community colleges. Absolutely, there's a lot of diversity there. Many students coming in saying, I didn't get accurate information. And so one of the things that we've done, and this would be an idea to throw out there for those institutions that might want to do this, we partnered with our College of Medicine in Tucson, and we actually did strategically, and again, because of COVID, we did Zoom meetings with our probably the top 10 community colleges in Arizona, and talked about pre-health and talked about medical school and, information that would help them to advise their students before they come to see us. And so that really works, because then they get, they're kind of left in the dark. And we all know, even doing the job now, it's overwhelming. There is so much information, right? But at least let them know who's a point person. Here's some information you can share with students. Know that you can refer those students to us. But implementing that type of outreach for community colleges, we're planning to set up a training for community college advisors so that we can talk to them, because a lot of them are not associated with the National Association of Health Professions. They might be part of NACADA. They might be part, or even not be in a professional organization, but we want to provide that information out to those community colleges and local areas to share that information. So we partner with our health sciences on doing that.
I'll also add that, looking at your institution, you'll also see that there is these initiatives to reach out to the community. So, some of the events that we host on our campus, we open it up to the community. It's not just for our students, being able to host and invite our colleagues down the road and say, hey, we're having this great presentation or this, great opportunity for your students to come to our campus to get this free information, no charge, or, again, that's the way is, how do we open up our doors? Because, we have an awareness of what institutions have what resources. And if we can build some collaboration across institutions, that's really the place where we can create more access.
So I noted a couple different things within those responses. One being, just kind of reflecting on the fact that in order to see some of the, I guess, longstanding changes that we're looking for in terms of representation within the health professions, to start thinking about like what systemic changes we can put in place, and partnering with national organizations to do so, because us alone, or you all alone at your institutions, will probably only be able to make a certain level of impact, but by partnering with some of the national organizations or even looking regionally in the area, that can help, get us towards that key goal there. I also heard, I don't know if I interpreted that correctly, but also making the connections with maybe your institution's strategic plan and some of the overall initiatives there, so they could kind of see value in some of the work that you're doing, and hopefully get some more support out of that as well. So I did see, let me see if this is another question that came in. I'm seeing a lot of chats coming in about getting access to our newsletter, which I'm excited about. So that means that you all are invested, interested, want to know more about how you can definitely share information about SHPEP with your students. So that's excellent. I did write down another question that I want to ask both of you. Josie, during your presentation, you talked about making intentional efforts to go to the students, not necessarily waiting for them to find you. I've had that experience before where they came to my office, like, we didn't even know your office existed. Where were you? So I was very happy to hear that your institution is taking a proactive approach and doing some things like during like the week of welcome and some of those early programming opportunities. I'm wondering, how do you ensure that that connection lasts, past that first year, making sure that they're revisiting your office and making sure they're tapping into all of these resources past that week of welcome and those other opportunities?
Well, I think this ties in really good with the idea I also wanted to share about, we talk about lack of budget, lack of funding for our offices. One thing that I do all the time is I partner with grant funded programs because they have money and they have money to support students. And so when we go to a welcome in the beginning of August, for instance, because we are a Hispanic serving institution also, is that there are many grant funded programs that have money that will support us. In fact, one creative measure that worked really well, as I mentioned, I used to do the diversity outreach for our office. So one of the grants that was written, it was an HCOP grant, actually bought out my time. So bought out half my time so that the office could actually hire another half-time person, while I spent half time nothing but focusing on diversity. So, and they have money for that, right? And they need that academic component. So when we talk about, renewing the grant or submitting a grant, is that a lot of times you have, a lot of programs put in there and student affairs type of events that go on. But if the students don't do well academically, or if they don't get good academic advice, we lose them, right? If they get put on probation or they get disqualified. So having that component, that's where that kind of trio idea, where you have a clinical psychologist to deal with mental health issues, family issues, and those sort of things, working with the student, having someone who's well known nationally to be connected, and then having that academic piece. Because if they're not here academically, if we can't clean up their grades or talk to them about options, then they're not here. We lose them, right? So I think, as far as the partnerships and that sort of thing is, a lot of them have those grant funded funds that they can support students. I know during COVID, they paid off some debt for some students because they had outstanding balances. And for SHPEP, we talked about transcripts being sent, right? And this always happens. And this is kind of a heads up for other institutions. Like, for instance, our institution, if you have a balance on your bursaries account, you can't send a transcript. I can't tell you the number of students who could not send transcripts who wanted to go to SHPEP because they weren't able to send a transcript, and their unofficial is not accepted. So that's one message that we had at our workshop yesterday was make sure your bursar's account is okay so you can send a transcript. Because if not, if you don't pay that balance, you won't be able to be eligible for this program. And I think I lost what your original question was.
But you shared such great information that I think
I'm like all over the place right now.
No, you connected back to our previous topic about who to form those partnerships with, right? So looking at those grant funded programs, like you said, can make a world of difference there. So
and they got to spend down. They got to spend down their money. So there's ways to do that. And that's a good way to support your office.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The original, oh, go ahead, Francisco.
I can jump in. Yeah, it really was, how do you work with students after that first year and get them coming back regularly? One of the processes that has worked well for me is kind of, it's hard to track students because they become pre-med and they may change their mind, they change majors, and then they switch around, and that's part of the process. That's fine. But looking for places where you see a decrease, looking at your data, how many students are coming in first year, second year, third year, right? And for us, what really became clear, and it was kind of more of our institute initiative, that they were seeing that a lot of students were feeling, the second year students were feeling kind of like left out. Everything's around the first year student. Welcome to our campus, orientation, all these fun clubs, all these fairs, and all these, the first year students are getting invited to everything. The second year student returns that fall and it's like, okay, this is different than last fall. And they connect with their friends, they connect with the clubs, and they just kind of go back into the semester, and they just kind of move back into like kind of autopilot. And so what, one of the initiatives that we did is we call them just second year check-ins. It's nothing major, but it really catches their attention. It's like, oh, that's me, second year, I'm here. Let me check in, right? The very common phrase that we hear from students is, I just want to check in. I'm like, perfect. We're gonna use that term because, again, we hear their language and we use and say, great, let's just have a place where you check in. We review a lot of the information that we actually provide in our orientation, but it's become a place where we also invite transfer students. So it's not just second year students, but incoming first, second or third year students who are transfer who don't have the same content, and we want to get them connected to our resources. So we found value in that. And then the students who are second year, that's really where we were able to catch them like, oh, wait a minute, it's not just about hitting on autopilot. This is a time where if you haven't started clinical, if you haven't started research, or where's your GPA, and just kind of like evaluating. And that's really one of the skills that we're really trying to teach students is self-evaluation, right? It's not about us giving them the green light, like, okay, now you're ready to apply, but rather it's like, do you feel like you're ready to apply, right? It's a very different approach and advising of giving them that power to make their decision. I tell them, you can apply without my support or with my support. It's your application. My goal is to be the best resource so that you can submit the strongest application. So my advice is only for the intentions of you being more competitive. So as a second year student, this is what you probably want to be working on. As a third year student, if you're getting ready to apply, this is where you need to be at, or this is the time where you actually are evaluating to decide. We don't call it a gap year. So that's another big thing. Everybody calls it a gap year, and it makes it seem like something is missing. And so we call it a bridge year. So you're bridging onto your next thing, right? You're strengthening your application, you're applying, you may be waiting to apply to take the MCAT. So you're bridging into the next phase in what you're going to do in your journey. So again, capturing those opportunities to get students to understand that this is a process that they take ownership of, self-evaluate. And then our role is to really remind them, hey, this is an ongoing relationship. It's not like your advisor where you check in, your academic advisor, you're just making sure that you're on track to graduate. This has a different level of involvement and your actual active participation.
I love that, the second year check-in,
yeah,
for sure.
A bridge year. Yeah, I like that.
Absolutely.
I'm still in that.
Yes, we're still bridging.
So I am keeping an eye on time here. I'm going to ask one final question before we move into closing. Reflecting back on the initial polling questions that we had, and we were able to learn that a majority of our audience were within those first 5 years within their experience, right? So considering that, I'm wondering if you have any words of wisdom that you would like to share with our audience today, based on the years of experience that you all have, what's something that you wish you had known during your first 5 years in the profession that you know now that you didn't know at the time?
That's a really good question. And I'm trying to think when I came into the role in the no pre-health background. I come from a family studies background. And again, sometimes that's more beneficial than having that science background, is to really calm them down. But I think I had some, and I didn't know about I had a huge steep learning curve. So I was an advisor at a community college and then a general advisor and worked student affairs. So I had to learn a lot about the pre-health process, but I actually had so many really good mentors that were so willing to share that information with me that actually I look back and it was painless. But, it's like surround yourself with mentors that are familiar, and I know my staff right now is 5 years or less. And so I see that. Probably the other thing is, I think a lot of times when we advise students, we feel so compelled or pressured. It's kind of like our pre-med students. I want to do the best. I need to know it all. I need to know it now. Is that it's okay, right? It's okay. And I think with the pandemic, the blessing on the other side is that, oh my God, there's so many great webinars. SHPEP has so many great webinars. That's a time to engage and find out more information. But I think looking back, I would say, if anything, I would probably have looked out for mentors a little bit early on. And they're still my mentors. They're still around, which is great. And then as your role is to mentor others. So as you see this turnover and, someone leaves, new person comes in, is to share your information. And I would say that would be the biggest piece of advice for me.
Thank you, Josie. I think for me, one of the pieces that looking back is, I would agree that having mentors and people support you. I think, we talked about organizations and national organizations and being involved. It really is part of the process. In pre-health advising, a lot of information is shared and resources shared, and don't reinvent the wheel. It really isn't. If you're a new advisor, connect with advisors. There is a great community in NAHP. There are amazing people who are very committed and driven with the student focus. That's the place where you can build collaborations, find opportunities to grow your programs, go to any of the regional or national meetings, because a lot of those are really based on best practices about learning things. A lot of the things that I've learned is really because I see something at another institution and say, okay, how does that relate to my population? How can I tweak that so it can be a success here, and being comfortable with failing? It really is. Sometimes you're going to put together a workshop and nobody shows up and you're going, what is it? It's like, oh, wait, today is the first day of finals. It's like, there's a whole other world sometimes that we miss out. So again, working with colleagues and being support, you're not alone. We're here as a resource. Josie and I met many moons ago because of these collaborations and these organizations that brought us together and opportunities to engage with each other. And I think being open to trying new things is going to change your advising style, and it's also the resources that you provide. So those would be the key main things. And the one thing that's been critical for mine is keep your pulse on the students. It's easy to be, a staff member, a faculty, and, we have our own personal lives, and COVID has really, made us aware that there's, we're balancing a lot. And keeping a pulse on the students really can give you a sense of, hey, I have my agenda, but if their agenda is in a different place or their minds are in a different place, it doesn't matter what I want to do, it's not going to happen. And I'm going to really just be very candid. Right now, we are still in a pandemic, and nothing's changed. And what has been very clear is now I'm beginning to hear the stories of the students. It's not just, from very specific populations, but across the board, we are now starting to hear the stories of the students who have lost family members because of COVID. And it's not just one or two, 3, 4, 5. In my experience, it's been around me. And so that has two very critical impacts. Is how did it motivate them? It might be a source of motivation. There's also a lot of trauma that's happening. How are we, again, going back to well-being, how are we, keeping our pulse to understand what is a true well-being, not just of one student, but our community. And so, if you use kind of those guiding principles, be comfortable for asking help. It's a quality we reinforce in our students. We also have to value that as advisors, our own well-being, and working with our colleagues in a more efficient way. Work smarter, not harder, right? And so those are the places that, reaching out and working with associations, NAHP and the regional associations as well can be a great place for support and for improving their ability to do outreach and do the best job possible.
Thank you both so much for sharing that. It's funny because I picked up that some of the advice that you offered sounded very similar to some of the advice that we would offer our students as well. Be comfortable with asking for support, make sure we're taking care of our wellness. So, just being able to take our own advice as well. So, well, I want to thank you both for your time today, for providing us with a wealth of knowledge and information. I encourage everyone that attended today to remain connected to us via our socials and YouTube, as well as our newsletter. I am now going to transition it over to my colleague, Tony Mancuso, who's going to share some closing thoughts with us.
Thank you so much. And, honestly, I first want to thank our esteemed panelists for hosting such an amazing session, and our moderator who was able to facilitate this session for us. As a reminder, the deadline for students to apply for SHPEP is February 5th, and Prehealth advisors, of course, are a pivotal component of outreach and recruitment. And really, I'm sure that you will share information regarding SHPEP with your advisees. That being said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much for an amazing session.